Hey,
Can you hear me?
yep. Just a second.
Oh, there you go. Never mind.
There we
Hi.
are. Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good. I just emailed you the property entry advisory disclosure form for the
Yeah.
car. Um, you know, we should probably use that. And not that we're going to have a lot of interest in vacancies right now, but you know,
Is it just a waiver or is it a protocol or I didn't read
it's
it
just
yet.
a disclosure. It's just a disclosure that says that it protects you against, or it's intended to protect us against claims that somebody got COVID-19 while they were touring a property with us. So,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, there we go. I see a bunch of people joining us now, so that's good. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Is Antonio jumping on today?
I think so. You should be. Yeah. Hey, Nicholas, how are you?
Hi, JJ.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
This is as close as we're going to get to seeing each other, but it'll have to do.
Well, it's better than nothing.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Good,
Long
thanks.
time-
How are you?
Good. Not long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It has. How's everything going with the bar? My goodness, you guys are up against it in that business for sure.
You know, we're closed, so it's going to be interesting to see if the feds and how the state supports us.
That is true. That is true. I have a tenant who was telling me the other day that the bar business is a uniquely difficult business because they, a lot of the bartenders and stuff don't make, I was $1,050 a week. And so he was saying something about it being better for them to go on unemployment, but if they weren't making $1,050 before, they're not going to make $1,050 afterward. So yeah, I don't know anything about that. What is your thought about that?
It's really hard to say until people start getting their checks. So I think I'll have a better idea of how well people are faring.
Yeah. Are you looking into that paycheck protection
Yeah,
grant?
definitely.
Is that
My
looking?
sister, who's our business manager, she'll be hopping on as well. Sure.
Okay.
Probably any minute now.
Okay.
She's actually handling a lot of that.
All right.
Hi, this is Denise.
Oh, hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
There you are.
Yes. Better.
Hi, Denise. We haven't met in person, but this is it.
Hi, how are
Josh
you?
Silverman. Good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Okay, just close the door. It's gonna be loud. I want to hear. People.
Hi, Barbara. There you are.
Hello,
How's it going?
pretty good.
How's everything in Reno?
All the rents are paid.
Hey, that's good. All right.
Yeah,
Most importantly.
That was the answer I was looking for. So very good.
yes. So the only ones that haven't paid are the ones that are vacant. And I have one that had a workout program down here.
We'll process it.
Not bad. Not bad.
JJ, you're gonna drive today?
Yeah, I'm going to drive. I got a few things to share, and yeah, I'll drive the presentation from here. Thank you. How are you?
Good.
Excellent, excellent.
Article was amazing, by the way. It's so
Thank
great to
you.
see.
Yeah, I was glad for the way that turned out. I'm going to share that with everybody today, as well as the latest on the virtual tour and everything, so that people can see what we're trying for, at the very least,
Perfect.
to see if we can get places rented. It's going to be an interesting time for the next few months to see what people are actually out there in the market looking to rent apartments. Yeah.
Terrific. Oh, hey, Nicholas. There's Nicholas Paleolius. Hi, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Video.
How are you?
I just sent you a private message. Did you see that?
I didn't see it. I'll take a look right now.
What you do is go to participants in the bottom
Oh,
of your
I know how to do it. I just didn't
Okay.
see it yet. It's
got
good
it.
to see you. Great to see everybody.
There's Honor. How are you?
There we go.
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Hanging in there.
Yeah.
It's Friday. Not that that really matters, but you know, it's a day being cooped up in the house with kids and not having to work at the same time. I guess that's better. On the weekend.
I'm reading a very long article from Jamie Dimon at Chase, and there's a lot of reference to a lot of aid, but nothing directly related to commercial mortgage debt in terms of relief programs. So I'm still looking for something from the big banks as related to commercial mortgages.
You all haven't gotten the word from Chase.
Nope.
So they have a forbearance program.
Okay.
There are two parts. One is 3 months, one is 6 months. Interest only. The principal is amortized over 24 months.
Huh.
And then the second part of their program is no loan payments for 3 months or 6 months. And the balance is amortized over 24 months.
What's the difference between those two things?
One is interest only, amortized over the life of the loan. Sorry, I meant that. Interest only, the difference is amortized over the life of the loan, a 3-month option or a 6-month option. And the second one is no loan payments, 3 months or 6 months.
I see.
But the balance is amortized over 24 months.
Okay.
Those are fair options. Those are fair.
JJ, I'll email you the.
Please, that'd be great. I'll share that with everybody.
Yeah.
That'd be excellent. Thank you.
That's great. I've been pestering my Chase rep, and all he sent me was this long letter from Diamond, which was not helpful at all. So thank you.
Yeah, I saw that letter. That was not useful.
Yeah.
So we got 306, JJ. Should we, you want to wait a little bit longer? Or
Yeah, just 1 minute.
Remember he said last time he has partial ownership in several properties. And then we've got a loan. We're sitting back. We're using income.
Okay. So let's get started. Welcome everybody. It's great to see you here and to hear those of you I can't see. But welcome to our second call this week, talking about the update with regard to our COVID-19 response and what we're doing with rent collection. As many of you may know, after having been on the call last week, we did have fairly good results. Most people who had asked for some sort of forbearance had paperwork, and it was reasonable, logical paperwork, and people were being very responsive and responsible in their requests. So I'll go over the data. We got 2 more rents in the last couple of days, so we are doing even better than we were on Wednesday. But out of 519 apartments, we had 35 vacancies. So we were expecting rent from 484 units, and we had 456 who paid rent as expected, which is over 93, 94%. We had 14 deferrals that gave us proper documentation, and half of those even paid a part of their rent, from one tenant who paid $200 out of the $1,800 rent, all the way up to some tenants who were paying 70 or 80% of their rent, which was great. And we really appreciate that, of course. And so we are we're looking at hopefully another 10 or so who are due to pay rent in the next week. We had one tenant who underpaid by 22%, shorted by about $500, didn't give us an answer, and wasn't responsive to the requests that we'd made to sort of document and tell us why. We had 3 earlier this week, and now we're down to 0 who didn't pay rent and didn't ask for a deferral or provide us with any explanation. One who was in that group emailed us today or yesterday and said, I just don't think it would be right for me to continue to stay here past the end of the month, because I don't really think I have any better job prospects then than I have now. So I'm going to go home to be with my family in Texas. I can't continue to pay the rent. And they have a deferral for April, and we'll be able to collect on that from the deposit. So that's pretty good. It is pretty good to see that that's what's happening. My fear back when this all started was a lot of hokey pokey and people trying to cheat the system and all of that. And I have seen 0 of that. So I'm really excited and happy to see that. It's good to know. We even had one tenant who's been a tenant for a long time called and said, I'm taking a 20% salary decrease as a result of this. Could I defer 20% of my rent? Like, absolutely. That sounds like a reasonable thing. They sent us the paperwork and said he was going to take a decrease. Now, I did have one other, and we're going to get to this in a minute, talking a little bit about the legal process with Denise Ledbetter, who is on the call today and will talk to us a little bit more about the conflicting orders and the best ways to secure these agreements in the future. But I had one tenant who had a stipulation that was entered into before this all began, and the rent payment arrangement had nothing to do with COVID-19 at all. And this tenant was due to pay the rent today and went ahead and did so, which was good to see. We are not entirely sure, we're not sure at all whether this tenant would be able, or we would be able to enforce this stipulation. We're hoping so, but the sheriffs are not actively out there enforcing them at this time. So it can be a bit dicey in those sorts of circumstances, but we're happy to see that it's gone the way that it has. Of our commercial tenants, 30 of them, 30 of them total, 20 called us and said they were completely unable to pay any rent. 10 have paid in full. And so, we are really happy with that. The data across a larger survey that the San Francisco Apartment Association released yesterday, I can share with you. I have a document on this. I'll sort of go through it, but the San Francisco Apartment Association did a survey of 315 rental housing providers this week that rent over 10,000 units, 10,377 units. It was a total of 6% of the city's 172,000 rent-controlled apartments. Actually, I'll just share this with you right now so that you can see it and follow along with me. But where is this document here? Hang on one second. This was working just a minute ago. Why is this not working? Put it here, maybe. Anyway, let me go through this. For some reason, it is advanced. No. There it is. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now. You see the screen, everybody? Hold on, share, here we go. Okay. And the San Francisco Apartment Association survey, 35% of respondents were dealing with smaller buildings between 1 and 4 units, and 7.6 owning or managing more than 100 units. And 5.7% of residential residents were unable to pay all or part of April rent due to the COVID-19 crisis, which is not terrible. The average amount of unpaid rent among those renters and commercial tenants unable to pay was $2,500, and a total of $1.5 million of rent was unpaid. And we've had 16% of housing providers who have had residents break their lease or unexpectedly give a 30-day notice to vacate over the past month. So that's really directly discussing what happens when tenants are, they are in the middle of a lease term, for example, and decide to give notice and break that lease, is what that means, is an unexpected breaking of the lease. So 4.8% of housing providers were able to work out mortgage forbearance with their lenders, and 17% said they're delaying paying their property taxes. We were ahead of the curve in paying our property taxes, as we like to be, and we had most of our property taxes paid by the first part of March to make sure that they're not late. And when they delayed the payment date, we kind of looked at it and went, well, I guess we could have used that money if we had people who were a little behind, but glad to get that done. So there's some observations. A lot of people do own their property outright. Many expressed fear that they would be unable to pay their expenses. Most expected they could continue to maintain properties and pay their expenses for between 3 to 6 months, which is good to know. I think that I'm expecting that this is going to get worse as we go forward, into May and June. People are kind of taking this 1 month at a time and paying rent when they're able to. So, it's still an issue. It's still something that we're working on and monitoring closely, and that I'll bring you more information about. With that, I think what I'd like to do now is introduce Denise Ledbetter to talk a little bit about the legal aspects of this, and then I'll do a demonstration. I want to show you all what we're doing for virtual tours for our apartments. We just did our first few and I'm really excited about them, and share the article that we had in the Chronicle, just came out yesterday, about this data. So why don't I turn this over to Denise and have her begin and give her information about the conflicting different problems that we're having with the government agencies.
Okay, so what has happened is that, as we know, the mayor's office has put out a variety of different orders. There have been 5 total, and they came out over a period of approximately 10 days. What is most important for our industry is order number 5, which pertains to the unlawful detainer actions in San Francisco County, whether it's commercial or residential. So we've been working under that order, and there is rent forbearance processes that you may or may not be familiar with respect to whether you were on the call last week or what information JJ has provided to you. But there's a succession of processes that we must comply with, which is first, the tenant says they can't pay rent, and then we say, here's the form you need to provide to us with information indicating why COVID-19 affected your ability to pay rent. And there's a process that they need to comply with in order for us to agree to rent forbearance. Unfortunately, there's no teeth in that order, which means that if the tenants don't pay, there's nothing we can do about it. It's sort of a promise to pay. What we like to see in the landlord-tenant bar and for representing the landlords is the ability to secure their commitment pursuant to a stipulation, which means that if they don't pay, they're evicted, or if they don't pay, here's the penalty that they'll pay, etc. There's an enforcement action. So in reference to the mayor's order, there's some language in the order that indicates that we may not proceed on any endeavor to evict. However, in order to secure an agreement, we must provide a notice, whether it's a 3-day notice or some other notice terminating the tenancy or providing notice to the tenant that they have done something wrong with their lease. So that's what the mayor's order indicates, that you must have a rent forbearance process, but landlords need an order that also allows us to enforce that action. Then, so her last order came out on March 31st. So we've all been working toward that goal where we're going to create a secured agreement whereby we're going to provide a 3-day notice, a 10-day notice, whatever the lease allows, breach of contract notice, etc., in order for us to secure the tenant's commitment on any sort of rent forbearance. The Judicial Council, which is the court of California, has come out with an order. It's 22 pages for a variety of different orders across the board. So the mayor, remember, is in the executive branch of our government. The Judicial Council is sort of the management of the court system for California. They create the rules about how the process of the judiciary operates. They came out with an order that's in conflict with the mayor's order. So we recently went to the mayor's office. We went to the assistant city attorney who was assigned to the mayor's office and said, hey, the mayor's order is in conflict with the state law. So City and County of San Francisco processes with respect to our ability to secure agreements, the unlawful detainer process, etc., is in violation of the state law with respect to what the courts are to do. Please make them correspond and not be in conflict anymore. That started this week. We had a call this morning with the gentleman who's assigned by the city attorney, and he suggested that we put language together for the mayor's office to impose in a new order so as to bring her order in compliance with state law. So with all of that happening, you can appreciate that we're in a state of flux right now. We want to be able to secure agreements. We do believe that we will have resolution of this issue by no later than the end of April. But during this period, we must be careful about how we secure our agreements. And once that's clarified, we will be able to proceed with the rent forbearance agreement, ultimately resulting in a stipulation for entry of judgment should the tenants not pay. But as JJ indicated, and my experience has been with clients, the majority of the tenants are paying. And when they're not paying, they're giving very good information as to why and the promise of when they will pay, and that we are going to seek confirmation of the process again in May. So every month we will be upgrading and contacting the tenants. If we don't already have an agreement with them, we'll be contacting the tenants who have not paid. I'm not sure if there's any particular questions I may answer regarding the security agreements and resolution between the executive branch and the judicial branch, but that's essentially where we are right now. We're in a state of flux with respect to securing the agreements until at least the end of April.
And I think, Denise, the bottom line for all of us is knowing that the 12 or 14 of our tenants that have not paid rent at this time are probably going to be something we're not going to be able to do anything with that right now until May.
That's right.
Because there just is no judicial harmony as to what is supposed to be done with unpaid rent at this time. So we're going to continue with our focus right now, which has been to simply be reasonable and be understanding and to collect the paperwork and make sure that people aren't abusing the system. But I think the most important thing that we discussed earlier, I think, is that we should just be really clear that there are very few people that are cheating right now.
That's
and
right.
The cheaters are going to cheat.
Yes.
That's what they do. And, thankfully, it doesn't seem like we have very many of them to deal with, but everybody isn't cheating. And that this has not become a widespread excuse for people to cheat. The people who were cheating before are going to use this as an excuse, but this is not making people who wouldn't otherwise cheat the system try to, do something dishonest. So, we're going to deal with people. Everybody's been above board and honest with their requests. And we are sympathetic and we're sensitive to people's thoughts and to their concerns. And we don't want to get into, arguments trying to take people's homes away from them. That's not what we're in business for. We're in business to provide homes for people and to make sure that they stay and that they're happy and they pay. So, that's going to be our focus moving forward. Do people have specific thoughts or questions they want to discuss about this particular thing, about the legal process and about how we work these out? Let me just, I'm going to unmute everybody and see if anybody has something specific. Do we have particular questions or conversations? Okay. Stop me if you do have something else. I have a couple of other things to share. As I think I mentioned on Wednesday, the Chronicle's J.K. Deneen called me on Wednesday for this data right before I shared it all with you. And the article that came out yesterday was this nice article from the Chronicle here that you can see. They came and we had a little talk about the process and about the numbers right here. We had a little talk about the numbers, and we had to talk about trying to show apartments. And we actually had just Wednesday gotten our first virtual tour, which I will also share with you. But this is upstairs from our office here, and basically shares a lot of the data that we discussed. But I'll put this in the comments for the video when we post it on the Smart Apartment Advisor channel. But it was a lot of it was similar to a lot of the other data that they got from other landlords, was similar to what we had. We're hoping that everything continues on the right way. This quote from tenant attorney Joe Tobner was an interesting one, saying that he expects a huge number of tenants who won't be paying rent. He says more and more people aren't going to be able to. It's not their fault. There's no way for landlords to collect right now, and no way for them to get the tenants out of the units. I haven't yet seen too many people who seem to be taking this as a way to stick it to the landlord, but we will see what happens. A lot of this won't be enforceable for quite a while. In the meantime, I'll also share, this is what we're working on with our apartments. This is our apartment upstairs. This is our apartment upstairs from the office here that has been vacant for a month or two. And now we're kind of stuck in a position where we're not going to be able to get anybody soon. So we've actually begun to take these virtual tours, these 3D Matterport tours, which are, let me just click that here, a really great way to try to at least get someone through the apartment. And you can see it gives people a three-dimensional Google Street View type way of seeing each apartment. And you can kind of take a walk down the hallway and take a look at inside each door. There's our brand new laundry that we put into this unit to try to jazz it up so people would want to rent it from us. And here's the kitchen and everything. And one of the other things that is really cool about this is you can actually measure the space. So for example, you can click right here and go into measurement mode and click right there. And you can start with something right here along the base of the wall and across this way. And it'll tell you it was 3.54 meters, which you can change. I don't know why it defaults to meters, but there you go, US Imperial, 11.7 feet. So you're able to, approximate as much of the process of sharing this with people as you possibly can. And when it comes time to actually show an apartment, we're hoping that people will be interested, and we won't have to do too many showings of apartments to people who maybe aren't as interested. I do want everybody to see the apartments before they rent them so that we don't have a lot of people backing out of deals because, oh, I didn't see that place. We'll also be using this car form that our friend Carla Anisman pointed out to me as a good practice, just a property advisory and declaration to give to tenants before they go into the units, to tell them that, hey, we're not liable if you somehow contract coronavirus. It's not my fault because you were going through this apartment. We'll be showing the apartments to a maximum of 2 people. We'll just sort of open the door, let people in and answer their questions, but we won't be getting more than a couple of people in at the same time. With that, I'm happy to open it up. We can have an open dialogue. Any questions that you might have, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
What's the cost of that?
Those Matterport tours, I think they're about $300. And yes, I will I will share the car form for the COVID notice. But yeah, it's an extra $300, and for now I'm just gonna pay that cost and move forward. It was never necessary in the past. I was renting these apartments without having to provide that. And now, because I can't really show these apartments, I will have to do everything I possibly can to, at least prove that, that we're doing the best we can and that people have access. But, it's not going to make it any easier for people to, they're not going to get out into the market any faster because they're going to get virtual tours. There just aren't people interested right now. So it's difficult. Any other thoughts or concerns or ideas? I'm always open to suggestions. People have ideas of how they, how we could do things, or questions about what we're doing. We're happy to listen. But we're just trying to get by day here and make sure that everybody stays healthy and safe while we figure out what the next steps are.
JJ, it's Nicholas.
Hi there.
From what I understand, the landlord should not give a rent reduction based on the circumstances, but rather should only do a rent forbearance. Is that correct?
That's correct. You don't want to get into a situation where you are formally decreasing the rent. You are giving forbearance for sums that are not able to be paid right now. As my one tenant, suggested, gee, I'm taking a 20% salary decrease, even though this is a tenant who's been in the building for 30 years and pays a low rent anyway. If he needs to get a 20% forbearance, we'll write that up and say we
And
are,
what happens if they won't sign the forbearance?
Nothing. We can't secure the forbearance agreement anyway. We can't collect it. We'll wait and serve a 3-day notice later if we have to. But the tenant doesn't have to sign the forbearance agreement in order for the forbearance arrangement to be, effective. I think, Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mayor's order simply requires that they provide proof that they need it. And then there's a mechanism. I think we have 6 months from each missed payment to make 6 months from when the mayor's order is resolved.
It's actually 6 months from the request. So for example, if a tenant asked in April, if you don't have some sort of specific agreement with respect to when the tenant will repay, they do have a total of no more than 6 months to repay, for example, April's rent.
Right. Right. And once again, this is the conflict that we're having, is that the state order is different from the mayor's order, and they're trying to work that out over the next couple of weeks before we get to May.
So
this is only,
JJ,
if I may, one more thing. This is only in relation to not having a secured agreement with someone. So if you have a tenant come to you and say, oh my God, I'm a gig person, I am waiting for somebody to hire me. I expect to be hired in June by such and such company, irrespective of COVID, because the work is not related to COVID. So that, in that sense, they won't take 6 months to pay April rent. You'll make an agreement now for them to pay whatever is agreed to. And if necessary, the reason for the stipulation is only if they don't do what they say they're going to do. Not to get them out, but literally to hang that over their head. As JJ said, I'm not interested in getting rid of tenants if they're going to pay pursuant to the agreement. It's the hammer hanging over their head if they don't pay pursuant to what they've asked of you.
But Denise, if they only give you a check for $1,000 and you deposit it, and you don't have a forbearance that's signed, what's the difference then between saying that this is now the ongoing rent? If you don't have it, you have to have a written agreement, don't you?
No, you never have to have a written agreement. If you have a lease and the tenant indicates that they only can pay $1,000, then you take the $1,000. You can serve successive 3-day notices in the course of a month, for example.
Okay.
There's no sort of accord and satisfaction with respect to the receipt of a partial payment of rent.
Right. And if you were to, for example, continue to accept $1,000 for the next 5 years as the rent, they might construe that as, because obviously this situation is not going on for that long. But if the tenant has to be making a claim for an accommodation, this is all I can pay because of COVID-19, that will, I think, prevent the rent board from then construing you as having reduced the rent. The problem that we're getting into, the problem that I think you're discussing, is the rent reductions that were sort of that landlords tried to get around with things like, was it Park Merced's bonus bucks back when we had the rental market decline in like 2008, 2009, and the financial crisis, or even before that. I think it was the dot-com bust, where they were saying, look, you're giving tenants a credit against their rent in order to avoid reducing their rent to meet the market, and in order to charge above market rents. And so then they said, well, look, the reduction in the rent is actually the rent from now on. We're not anywhere near that with this situation, because the tenant has to be saying, look, I need a COVID-19 forbearance. They don't have to sign an agreement for that to be valid. And I don't think right now that the rent board's going to start saying that your $1,500 rent was reduced to $1,000 forever during this crisis. But we don't know. I mean, the rent board does crazy things all the time, but I think you can probably count on them not doing that in this circumstance today.
I have another question for Denise. If your tenants now, they've applied for assistance, unemployment, the additional unemployment, and they are collecting that money, but they don't want to pay the rent, do you have any suggestions? I mean, they will be having income. So, I mean, because of the coronavirus, they're having, yes, they lost their job, but now they're pulling in $1,000 a week in unemployment.
How do you prove that? How do you know they received the check?
I don't know, but
Right.
I do know that they're implying
All right, I appreciate that, but there are a lot of people who are applying for a lot and nobody's seen a check yet. So unless you can prove that they've received the check and somehow that provides enough income, JJ's example, the gentleman who said, I took a 20% pay cut, will you take 20% less of rent? Yes. So if they come to you and say, you know, I got an unemployment check, but it's only half of what I normally make because I can't verify my tips, I'm a waiter, then that's what's going to happen. Can I have a 50% rent reduction until I get back up to speed? So unless you can prove that they have money that they're not paying you, then there's nothing that we can do to enforce it until such time as we're back into the court system. I guess respectfully, you want to try to avoid the rent board whenever possible when you can get into San Francisco Superior Court with an actual notice, because the court system has rules and regulations and laws and statutes that must be followed versus the rent board.
Denise, I have a question. Last week you said that landlords can collect rent, deferred rent 6 months after the shelter-in-place order was lifted. I thought you had said that, but now you're saying it's 6 months after the actual month of deferment that they
Well,
can
it's a little different. So technically, the process is in April, a tenant says, I can't pay rent. That person has 6 months from April.
Okay.
Pay all that rent back. But let's assume worst case scenario, the shelter in place goes through June. They still have 6 months from June. So every month they can't pay, they have 6 months to pay that month's rent. April, they have till September. May, they have till November. June, they have till December, 6 months. But that doesn't mean that a tenant will take that much time. But that's technically what the process allows under the mayor's order.
Okay.
And remember, this is the mayor's order. The orders can be lifted at any time. So if the mayor, for example, we find out that we are going back into the business of working and everybody is supposed to be back at work and back in their job, et cetera, by the end of May, for example, then the shelter in place will be lifted, which means that nobody's going to be able to use COVID for shelter in place, I would say past June, right? So it's literally a matter of reading the orders to determine what is happening at any given time, and it's constantly evolving, as we know from watching CNN. So this is currently what's going on.
Yeah.
But once the orders are lifted, and they can be lifted at any time, then we need to figure out what we did before those orders were lifted to determine when the rent should be coming in. And this is all presuming that we're not going to have a stipulation from the tenant.
It's a moving target.
Bingo.
Big time.
Everything here is a moving target. Yes.
Moving target. We must remain nimble. And every single tenant, just like every single person, is different. They all will have a different story and a different, not story, but a different understanding of what's going on in their lives and their income.
Yep.
All right. Any other last thoughts, questions, ideas? Anybody heard a good joke lately? I don't think. I don't think anything's that funny these days, but yeah.
My son has been sharing his TikTok with me. So there are some fun 10-second videos on that.
Yes.
Are we Joel. Mute or not?
Finally, Joel.
No.
Okay.
Center stage.
JJ, I was just going to say, we'll be interested to hear what kind of traffic you get from that virtual, kind of saying or responding to that virtual tour. I thought it was quite effective, actually, that virtual tour. And, relative to getting a good tenant for a long time at a good rent, that's not a bad investment. It might be a tool that even not in constrained conditions like this might be interesting to consider using in the future.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that we get really good feedback and that people are excited about it. That tour comes, it's used by, there's a special camera. It's called a Matterport camera that costs like $3,400. I looked it up. And he takes the camera into the room on a tripod, and I think he stands at each one of those little circles and presses a button, and it stitches all the data together. When he came to take the pictures, he took Matterport and he took the regular photos, and it took him 15, 20 minutes to do the whole thing when he was in the apartment, and then obviously to take it back to his shop and get it to us. But he had it to us, later that night, early the next morning.
So he gave you stills and the tour? Okay.
Right. So it's all a package. And so it's a little more expensive than getting regular photos, but it's a great, extra feature, especially in these times. And yes, I agree. There may very well be a real business case for continuing to use that. But I think the most important thing and the very bottom line of this is that I'm not going to be renting people apartments without them seeing them first and having visited them, so that I can be sure that they really want them, because I could just see
that.
it still doesn't replace that in person, and that's how they're going to be using those apartments. They're going to be using them in person, so I don't want them renting them without having visited.
That's right. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Are we recording clicks on those tours? Is there a way to get?
I don't know yet. We'll be able to monitor the number of inquiries that we get. And we'll certainly be able to monitor the number of responses and open house requests, visiting requests that we get. But for now, I don't know. I have to figure that out. I just got this online a couple of days ago, so I have to figure out what the click level will be.
Yep.
I'll ask one more question if Denise is
Sure.
still on. Denise, when you were describing how you've been in dialogue with Mayor's office about reconciling their order with the judicial system's order, it sounds like it was a constructive kind of dialogue where you weren't necessarily having to fight to get some cooperation. Do you feel like attorneys representing property owners, landlords, and so forth are not facing undue pressure from tenant legal activists and rent board and so forth? Do you feel like it's actually a kind of a non-contentious atmosphere right now in where the politics might surface?
No.
No.
I think so long as our property is as valuable as it is, it will always be very contentious. I do believe, and interestingly, JJ and I were talking about this earlier, I do believe that taking into consideration the tenant's right to counsel that came into play really effectively about last year, about this time, it has been easier for landlord-tenant bar to deal with tenant counsel versus impropers that we were dealing with a lot. So the San Francisco the San Francisco Superior Court would always give way more credibility to an improper versus tenant counsel. So now they're expecting tenant counsel to have legitimate arguments as opposed to, oh, I didn't get the paperwork from the propers. So I'm seeing more legitimacy with respect to the tenant defenses. But at the same time, we have much more sophisticated, very learned, very educated tenants' rights attorneys, because there's so much money pouring into the mayor's office in order to fund the program, that it has stepped up the bar with respect to our landlord-tenant bar work, in that we have sophisticated, rational, objective arguments on both sides. And the court is, my experience has been that the court has been much more favorable to landlords than in the past, because we have learned tenant attorneys, and the judges can look down tenant counsel and say, you know better than that, counsel, whereas they could never say that with the propers or the eviction defense collaborative people who just have the paperwork. So in that sense, yes, But no, it's always going to be very contentious, very heartfelt, hard fought, which is the reason why our concern with the executive branch of the mayor being in violation of the Judicial Council. And we've told them in a nice way, and remember, we're dealing with the attorney representing the mayor's office. He gets it. He's an attorney. It's the politicians in the mayor's office that are not going to be pushed around by landlords in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So what has to happen is that there has to be some political incentive for her. And one of the things is that we're saying to her in a very nice way, but with, this is not a threat, it's a promise, we're going to sue you. We're going to sue the city and county because they're in violation of state law. And so the attorney is taking that back to his boss, the mayor, saying, you know, I think maybe you don't want to upset Gavin Newsom if you ever want to be in state government, Mayor Breed. And so that's what's happening behind the scenes.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, I will be letting everybody know. I'll send out an email with the links to the videos on the Smart Apartment Advisor channel shortly. And then we'll send out some more meeting announcements next week for Wednesday and Friday, and we'll see what develops as the week goes on. Thank you so much, Denise, for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge and expertise in sharing the really messy reality of all of this.
Yes, never to be
you.
repeated in our lifetime.
I hope not. I hope that we are all ahead of this and maybe we're able to prepare for these things a little bit better in the future. But thank you everybody for joining us. Really appreciate your comments and your participation. Yeah, we look forward to talking with you again next week. Have a good weekend. Happy holidays, spring holidays. This wasn't how we were planning on celebrating our spring holidays, everybody, but try to enjoy it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, JJ. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.